I asked when the wedding was. My daughter-in-law didn't even look up from her phone. She just gave this smug little smirk. Yesterday, just for the special people. My son stayed silent. I didn't say a word. I just walked back to my room and logged into my bank account. A week later, my phone rang. The bills are overdue. Did you send the money yet? I smiled. And for the first time in my life, I didn't spend a single cent. So, when is the big day anyway? I asked, setting my mug down on the kitchen table. My daughter-in-law, Sloane, didn't look up from her phone. A thin, satisfied smile played on her lips. Yesterday, Margaret. We tied the knot yesterday, she said casually, scrolling through her photos. My son Julian sat right next to her, staring into his newspaper in total silence. I felt a sharp sting in my chest, but I kept my cool. Yesterday. And why wasn't I told? I asked, my voice steady. Sloane just shrugged. It was a tiny ceremony just for the special people. We didn't want the stress. I looked down at my hands. I'm 68 years old, a widow for 5 years, and I live in the mother-in-law suite of the very house I signed over to Julian under the condition of a life estate and mutual support. In that moment, I realized that support was a one-way street for them. They had the main floors. I was still paying the property taxes and most of the utilities out of my Social Security and pension. Sloane stood up without clearing her plate. We've got to run, Margaret. Trash goes out today, don't forget. They walked out like I was an invisible maid. I sat there for a long time drinking my cold coffee. I didn't cry. My husband used to say, Margaret, if you aren't invited to the party, you don't have to help set the table. I got up, went to my room, opened my laptop, and started looking at my bank statements. For months, I'd been paying for the groceries for the whole house. I paid for the high-speed internet, the heating oil, and the landscaper. Julian always had cash flow issues, or so he said. But apparently, just there was plenty of money for a secret wedding. I looked at the wedding photo on Sloane's Instagram. She was wearing a dress that easily cost $3,000. Behind them was the terrace of an expensive country club in the Berkshires. I closed the laptop. My mind was made up. If I wasn't one of the special people, then I didn't need to carry the burdens of the ordinary ones. I grabbed the spare key to my basement storage and started sorting. I slept surprisingly well that night. Monday morning, I waited until their car pulled out of the driveway. The silence in the house was heavenly. I didn't go out to water Sloane's roses like I usually did. Instead, I went to the breaker box in the hallway. My late husband had been smart when we built this place. The upstairs and the suite were on separate circuits. I didn't cut their power. That would have been petty. Instead, I went to the grocery store. This time, I only bought for myself a small loaf of sourdough, some sharp cheddar, and a bag of premium coffee. When I got back, I cleared out the shared fridge in the main kitchen. Everything I had paid for went into my small fridge in the suite. Julian came home early that afternoon, looking stressed. Mom, where's the deli meat? And did you forget to pick up the package for Sloane? He was standing in my doorway. I was sitting in my armchair reading. I'm only shopping for my own needs now, Julian, I said softly. And I'm not in charge of packages. I was out for a walk this afternoon. He stared at me, blinking. But we have an arrangement. Right, I replied. An arrangement between family members. But Sloane said I'm not one of the special people invited to your major milestones. So I've decided to just be a tenant. He started to argue, but his phone buzzed. He cursed under his breath and disappeared upstairs. Shortly after, I heard Sloane's shrill voice. She was likely looking for her favorite yogurt, the one I'd thoroughly enjoyed for breakfast. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. Before bed, I left an envelope on the stairs. Inside was a detailed breakdown of the utility bills for the last 6 months split by square footage. Until now, I'd been footing the whole bill. The reaction didn't take long. At exactly 7 a.m., my phone rang. I was already up sipping my tea. It was Sloane. Her voice wasn't smug anymore. It was sharp and demanding. "Margaret, what is this note on the stairs? And did you transfer the money?" I set my cup down. "Good morning, Sloane. What money are you talking about?" "The wedding vendors. The caterer is calling every hour and the photographer is sending overdue notices. There's over $15,000 outstanding. You said you'd help us get started in our marriage." I almost laughed at the audacity. "I said I'd help with your wedding. Since I wasn't invited and only found out after the fact, I don't consider it my business." "You can't do that. We counted on your share. We used our savings for the down payment on the new Audi because we thought you were covering this." Her voice was hitting a fever pitch. "Listen, Margaret, we're family. You live here rent-free. This is the least you can do." "I don't live here rent-free, Sloane. I own half this house and I have a life estate." Julian knows that very well. Silence on the other end. Then she hissed, "You are so selfish. If that money isn't there by Friday, we're in real trouble. Do you want your son to be in debt?" "Julian is a grown man," I said calmly. "He should have asked me before spending money that didn't belong to him. Have a nice day." I hung up. My heart was thumping, but I didn't feel bad. I went into the garden and sat on the bench. Usually, I'd be pulling the weeds Sloane ignored. Today, I just let them be. I watched a robin in the cherry tree. Life was suddenly much simpler once I stopped paying for other people's mistakes. But I knew they wouldn't give up that easily. For the next 2 days, they gave me the cold shoulder. No one said hello in the hall. Julian avoided eye contact whenever he passed my window. On Wednesday night, I realized they had changed the Wi-Fi password. In the past, that would have panicked me, because I do all my banking online. But that morning, I'd already gone to the Best Buy in town and bought my own mobile hotspot. I plugged it in and was back online in minutes. It was a small investment in my independence. Later, when Sloane was talking loudly in the hallway about how some people are going to be sitting in the dark if they don't start pitching in, I just smiled to myself. I started securing my things in my part of the house, not because I feared theft, but to draw a line. I had a locksmith come and change the lock on my suite door. As a resident, it was my right. When Julian tried to let himself in that evening with his spare key to borrow some milk, the key wouldn't turn. He knocked. I opened it just a crack. "Yes, Julian." He looked confused. "The key doesn't work. I changed the locks," I explained matter-of-factly. "Since we aren't special people to each other anymore, it's better if we both have our privacy. If you need milk, the grocery store is open until 9 o'clock. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "Mom, what is wrong with you? Is this about the wedding?" That was Sloane's idea. She wanted something modern. "And you agreed to it," I interrupted. "You aren't a victim of your wife, Julian. You're a partner in that decision. And decisions have consequences." I closed the door before he could respond. I heard him trudging up the stairs. Immediately, a massive fight broke out upstairs. I turned up my radio and listened to some jazz. It was time to prep the next step. On Thursday, I invited my old friend Martha over for tea. Martha used to be a bookkeeper and knew everything about real estate in our county. "Margaret," she said, taking a bite of coffee cake, "you know those two are living way beyond their means." "Right. That new Audi in the drive is at least an $800 a month lease." I nodded. I'd seen the paperwork in Julian's old office back when I still cleaned for them. They think I'm their personal bank, Martha. They threw a wedding on credit and thought I'd sign the check at the end to keep the peace. Martha shook her head. That's not peace. That's a hostage situation. After she left, I pulled out the original deed and the agreement we signed when I transferred the house. My husband and I had insisted on a clause. If Julian failed to cover the carrying costs of the home insurance, maintenance or gross negligence occurred. The management rights for the entire property would revert to me until the debts were cleared. I called Julian into the kitchen. Sloan came with him looking ready for a fight. Listen, I said, laying the document on the table. Tomorrow is Friday. I am not paying the $15,000 for the wedding. Furthermore, I am no longer covering the property taxes or the homeowner's insurance for this year. That's another $5,000 you owe me. Sloan gave a forced laugh. And what are you gonna do? Evict us. Julian owns this house. I tapped paragraph 4. Read this, Julian. If you don't cover the costs, I take over management. I will list the upstairs on Airbnb as a vacation rental to cover the expenses. You two can move into the basement suite if I decide to take you on as tenants. The laugh died on Sloane's face. Julian went pale. You'd put strangers in our house. I have to, I said calmly. I can't afford the upkeep alone if you aren't doing your part. You spent the money on caviar while the roof needs repair. Sloan stormed out, but Julian stayed in his seat. Friday morning arrived, the day Sloan had threatened legal consequences. I was sitting on my porch, reading the paper when a van pulled up. It was the florist from the wedding. He looked livid. He rang the upstairs bell, but no one answered. Finally, he came over to me. Mrs. Brennan, I can't get a hold of your son. The bill for the floral arrangements is a week overdue. He said you were handling the finances. I stood up slowly. Good morning. I'm Margaret Brennan. I didn't authorize that order. And I wasn't even a guest at the event. My son and his wife are upstairs. You should try calling them or send a formal demand to Julian Brennan. The man muttered a curse. He told me you were the owner and had the funds. I am the owner, but I wasn't the client. I corrected him politely. Please, leave my property. He left and I saw the curtain twitch upstairs. Sloan was watching. 10 minutes later, Julian came down. He looked completely broken. Mom, please. The caterer is threatening to go to collections. It'll ruin my credit. I can't lose the car. I need it for work. He sat on the steps, looking like the little boy who just scraped his knee. Julian. I said, why didn't you tell me the truth? Why all the secrecy? He looked at the ground. Sloan said you'd just want to take over everything. She wanted a perfect wedding without the old-fashioned family stuff. She said you had plenty of savings anyway. So I was good enough to pay, but too old-fashioned to celebrate. He was silent. I won't give you the money as a gift, Julian, but I will offer you a loan, with a written contract and monthly interest, and Sloan signs as a co-signer. She'll never do it, he whispered. Then, I said, standing up, you have to decide if you're going down with her ship or if you're finally going to grow up. I went inside and left him sitting on the stairs. The power dynamic had officially shifted. Saturday morning things boiled over. Sloan realized I wasn't bluffing. I heard her throwing things upstairs. Then she flew down the stairs and started hammering on my door. I opened it, completely relaxed. You spiteful old woman, she screamed. You're trying to destroy our marriage just because you weren't the center of attention. It was our wedding, our day. I waited for her to catch her breath. It was your day, Sloan, and they are your bills. It's a very simple concept most people learn in grade school. We're moving out. She shrieked, "Julian, pack your bags. We're leaving her here to rot in this drafty old house alone." Julian was standing in the background holding a suitcase, but he looked anything but convinced. He knew they couldn't afford an apartment half as nice as this, especially not with those debts hanging over them. "You're free to go," I said pleasantly. "But don't forget Julian is still liable for the maintenance of this house as long as his name is on the deed. If you leave, I'm renting the whole place out immediately to cover the costs. I already have 3 people from the garden club who are looking for a place." Sloane stared at me. She expected me to beg them to stay. She expected me to apologize and write the check just so I wouldn't lose the grandkids they hadn't even had yet. But I was ready to be alone. I'd rather be alone with my dignity than a servant in my own home. "Julian," she demanded. Julian looked from her to me. He set the suitcase down. "Sloane, we can't go. We don't have the money. We have to take Mom's deal." Sloane looked like he'd slapped her. "You're taking her side?" "No," Julian said with a new firmness. "I'm taking the side of reality. We got in over our heads and we treated Mom like crap." Sloane stormed out of the house without her suitcase and slammed the front door so hard the windows rattled. The weekend passed in a strange kind of silence. Sloane had gone to stay with her mother. Julian stayed behind. On Sunday, for the first time in years, he helped me in the garden. We didn't talk much, but it wasn't a hostile silence. He trimmed the hedges while I tended the flower beds. That evening, we sat in my kitchen. I had the contract ready. "Here is the loan for $15,000, I said. "0 interest, but a monthly payment of $500. Also, you take over all utilities and insurance starting today. I only pay for my own electricity and water." Julian read it carefully. "This means we have to give the Audi back and get a used car." "That's exactly what it means," I confirmed. "And it means Sloane doesn't bark orders here anymore. When she comes back, my rules apply to the common areas." He signed it. I didn't feel a surge of triumph, just a deep sense of relief. I wasn't the beggar in my own life anymore. I handed him the first check for the caterer. "Go pay this in person tomorrow and apologize to the man." "Thanks, Mom," he said quietly. "And I'm sorry about the wedding. I was a coward." I nodded. "Apologies are good, Julian. Actions are better. I want you to change the upstairs lock back tomorrow so my key works. Not because I want to spy, but because it's my house." He promised he would. That night, I slept with the window open. I heard the wind in the trees and felt truly safe for the first time since my husband passed. I hadn't lost my son. I had forced him to become a man. But the biggest test with Sloane was still to come. Sloane came back on Tuesday. She was quiet, almost submissive, which for her was a clear sign of defeat. Her mother had likely made it clear there was no room for a permanent luxury lifestyle on her couch. She found Julian washing the windows a job she used to try to pawn off on me. I ran into her in the hallway. She tried to scurry past, but I stopped her. "Sloane, a moment." She stopped staring at the wall. "Julian told you about our agreement. I expect you to sign as a guarantor." She scoffed. "And if I don't? Then the loan is void and the legal notices will be served tomorrow. I've already spoken to the caterer. He's just waiting for my signal." I held out the pen. She took it with shaking fingers and scribbled her name. "One more thing," I added. "The kitchen upstairs is your domain now. We'll share the laundry room on a set schedule. And the next time you plan a party, invite whoever you want but pay for it with your own money." She looked at me, and for the first time I didn't see arrogance. I saw respect. She had underestimated me. She thought an older woman in a quiet suburb was an easy target for a little gaslighting. She forgot that my generation built this country with hard work and grit. "Fine, Margaret," she said softly. She didn't call me Mom. And that was fine by me. We didn't need to be best friends. We just needed a working foundation. She went upstairs and I heard her helping Julian. I went into my living room and poured myself a small glass of sherry. My plan had worked. No lawyers, no police, no huge drama. Just drawing lines in the sand. But the story wasn't quite over. 3 months later, it was a sunny Sunday in September. I was sitting in the garden, which was now perfectly manicured. Julian and Sloane had traded the Audi for a reliable used Honda. They went out to eat less, and Sloane had started picking up overtime at the law firm where she worked. There was no big explosion, no sappy reconciliation scene. But the atmosphere in the house had shifted. When we passed each other on the stairs, there was a polite greeting. Sometimes Julian would bring me a slice of cake or ask if I needed anything from Home Depot. That afternoon, there was a knock on my sliding door. It was Julian. He held an envelope. "The third installment," he said proudly. "And I have the receipt for the homeowner's insurance. It's all paid up." "Very good, Julian," I said, taking the envelope. "Want a coffee?" He hesitated, then nodded. We sat in the sun for a while in silence. "Sloane is still a little embarrassed," he said suddenly. "She doesn't know how to act around you." "She doesn't have to do anything special," I replied. "Honesty is more than enough." I thought back to her words, "just for the special people." In a way, she'd been right. I was a special person in this house now, not because I sacrificed myself, but because I took my place back. I looked at Julian, who was finally taking responsibility for his life. It was the best wedding gift I could have given him, even if it wasn't the one he wanted at the time. I was 68. I was a widow, and I was finally free from the burden of trying to please everyone. As he left, I stayed in the garden for a long time. I didn't need anyone to save me. I had my keys, my money, and my dignity. And that was more than enough. I closed my eyes and enjoyed the silence of my own home. Sometimes you only show your strength when you stop giving.